They held a family vote to ban me and my daughter from Christmas. I just said got it. A week later I refused to co-sign their golden child's $358,000 mortgage, then my dad showed up on my porch shaking and screaming. You know, there are moments in life when something snaps inside you, when a quiet anger, a simmering injustice, finally boils over. For me, it wasn't about being disrespected. It was about seeing my child treated like she was invisible, like she didn't even belong in her own family. And that was the line. It all started subtly, as these things often do. I remember walking into my parents' dining room that Christmas Eve, carrying a store-bought pecan pie. Mom had texted, "Don't bring anything complicated," which was her nice way of saying, "If you cook, we'll complain." My daughter, Grace, who was 12 then, was usually chatty, but she was quiet that whole drive. She always got quiet on the way to my family's house. The table was already set for 12, with those fancy, looping name cards Mom prints every year: Mom, Dad, Liam, Emma, Aunt Val, Uncle Rob, Nana, Papa, Tyler, Mia, Baby, and Guest. No card for me. No card for Grace. I pretended not to see it. I was used to being the extra chair pulled in from the garage. We'd been there maybe 10 minutes when Mom, with a sickeningly sweet smile, tapped her wine glass with a butter knife. "Okay, quick family vote," she announced, like it was a fun game. "Hands up if you think Grace should stay home this year, since it's, mostly for the little cousins." It took a second for her words to even register, to make sense. Then, in what felt like a rehearsed, sickening motion, 10 hands shot into the air. No hesitation. No pause. Just muscle memory. Even Dad's hand. Even my sister Emma's, already piling appetizers onto her plate. Grace was sitting on the piano bench in the corner, a paper snowflake she'd cut in the car resting in her lap, watching every single wrist lift. No one looked at her. But I did. My throat just closed up. The clock over the stove ticked, echoing inside my head. Mom just shrugged, still smiling. "It'll be hectic, honey. Better for her to relax at home. We'll FaceTime you." My hands started to tremble. I managed one word. "Got it." I walked the pecan pie over to the kitchen island, set it down next to my nephew's cake. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I didn't trust my voice. Grace quietly slid her snowflake into her pocket and asked if she could help set out napkins. Mom, still with that fake smile, said, "That's sweet, but we've got a system." And just like that, she shot her back to the bench. I should have grabbed her hand and walked out right then. But I didn't. Not yet. Look, I'm 40 years old, I live in Columbus, Ohio. I'm an HVAC tech. Not fancy, but I'm steady. I do clean installs. I fix what people ask me to fix. I show up when I say I will. I share a small ranch house with Grace, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, beige siding that fades every winter and makes this weird whine in the wind I keep meaning to fix. I got full custody when Grace was 6. Her mom moved out of state, sends birthday cards, and that's its own story. I make enough to keep the mortgage paid, the fridge full, and send Grace to 1 week of camp every summer. In my family, I'm the reliable one. Translation, I'm the wallet with legs. When Dad's truck needed a new transmission, he called me before he called the shop. I wired him $2,100, labeled it Dad Huntington because he couldn't figure out Zelle. When Mom wanted a new washer and dryer because the old ones ate socks, I used my Lowe's card and let her pay me back $20 a month until she forgot. When Emma redid her kitchen, I spent a whole weekend moving her gas line for free, even covered the inspector's permit fee because she said, "We're drowning, Danny." When Liam started his craft beer phase and needed kegerators for his launch event, I put them on my credit card as support. For years, I sent Mom $150 every single Friday for Nana's prescriptions. One cold snap, the power got shut off at my parents' house. I paid the whole balance online, in my van, between calls, and sent Mom the confirmation code. She said, "You're a lifesaver. You'll get it back at Christmas." I never did. They always said thank you. They never wrote it down. That's just how it always was. But with Grace, it's always been different. She's always been an accessory in their house. Cute when she's quiet, a burden when she isn't. No one was ever cruel in a way that would make a scene, you know? It was 1,000 paper cuts. They forgot to put her name on the cousin gift exchange, so she sat there and watched other kids unwrap theirs. They took a family photo last 4th of July and told us to wait for the next one. It never came. At Thanksgiving, Mom played the kids' table with name tags and put a folding chair at the end labeled guest. That's where Grace sat, knocking the card table leg. Once, she drew Nana a card, and Nana said, "You're so good for not making a mess." Then she set a sweating glass of iced tea right on top of it. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was modeling good behavior for Grace by not taking the bait every time. My name is Daniel, but everyone calls me Danny. Maybe that's the joke. We were always invited to things, then told the rules after we arrived. I paid. I shut up. I thought eventually they'd notice. What happened at that dinner wasn't a surprise. It was just the first time they actually raised their hands. And they did it in front of my kid. That's what snapped something in me. After the vote, Mom moved on like we'd just settled where to put the coats. Great. So, it'll be just the babies on Christmas Eve. Less chaos. Danny, you'll bring that folding table. Liam, you handle the playlist. We'll FaceTime Grace, of course. Got it, I said again, the words tasting like ash. I walked Grace to the car when dessert came out. We sat there, doors closed, heat running, my untouched pie still on the counter inside. She just stared out the windshield at the darkness. My hands rested on the wheel, I could see my tired reflection in the glass. "I'm not little," she said, so quietly. "I know," I replied, my voice thick. "They made me feel little." I know. It hurt to admit I knew. I should have protected her better. In that parking lot, I promised myself I would. A week later, at 9:07 a.m., my phone rang. I was parked outside a job, a heat pump replacement on a house that backed up to a creek. It was Mom. "Quick question, sweetie," she chirped. "Don't say no before you hear me out." I closed my eyes. "What's up?" "It's about Emma and Tyler's pre-approval. They found the perfect place in Upper Arlington. 3 bedrooms, fenced yard, schools are amazing, but the bank is being such a pill about the student loans. It's $358,000, which is honestly a steal. All they need is a cosigner for a year, maybe 2. You have the best credit, you know that." She laughed, like it was a compliment. "It won't cost you anything, Danny. It's just a formality." I looked at the job ticket. I looked at the photo of the old heat pump on my iPad. I looked at my hands, the cracked knuckles, the nail I'd slammed 2 days earlier installing a condenser fan blade. A year or 2. Just a formality. A massive debt that would be on my back if anything went sideways. And once again, I'd be helping. The same week. They voted my kid off Christmas. My mouth went dry. I could hear myself breathing. She filled the silence. "They already have the loan officer lined up. I gave him your email. He said he'd DocuSign you the packet this afternoon." Her voice turned syrupy. "You're such a good brother. It'll take so much pressure off you when we're in the new place. Imagine Christmas there. Oh, except Grace is staying home, but we'll work around it. It's going to be beautiful." I pictured Grace on that piano bench. I pictured 10 hands in the air. "Mom," I said, "yes." She was already doing that fake grateful sigh. "No." She barked a quick laugh. "Danny, don't." "No," I said again, firmly. "I won't cosign." Silence. Then she hissed my full name like I was 9. "Daniel, stop being dramatic." "It's not dramatic. It's protecting my child and myself. You're punishing Emma because of some misunderstanding at dinner." I'm setting a boundary because of a pattern, I said, and I surprised myself with the calm in my voice. And because I don't want a $358,000 debt tied to me for the next 30 years. It's not 30. Oh my God, you always make everything about money. That was rich, coming from her. The DocuSign is coming, she said tightly. Just click, Danny. Don't make this a whole thing. It's already a whole thing, I said, and I hung up before she could say another word. My hands were shaking worse than they had at the vote. At lunch, the DocuSign packet came through. The email subject line, please sign conventional mortgage borrower 2. My name was in the salutation. The loan officer's signature block had a smiling headshot. The amount, $358,000. Term, 30 years. Boxes for initials on every page. I opened it. I scrolled all the way to the end. There was a big blue button, Finish. I clicked Decline to sign. A prompt asked for a reason. I typed, I will not co-sign this mortgage, and hit Submit. A red banner appeared, Document declined. I took a screenshot. Then I took 2 more. I forwarded the decline confirmation to my own email, then saved the PDF to my records folder next to the power company receipt and the transmission invoice and a dozen other receipts for things I'd paid for the people who never sent receipts back. Then I texted Emma and Tyler a single message, I'm not your co-signer. I put my phone face down and went back to the heat pump. The old unit groaned and died cleanly into my cart. It felt like a message, in a language only I could hear. The fallout started fast. Mom called 5 times before 3 p.m. She left a voicemail on the second call that started polite, we just need to talk, honey, and by the end, she was crying and saying she'd never asked me for anything. On the 4th call, she sounded furious. You don't get to punish the whole family for your choices. Grace isn't even. She stopped herself, the way she always stopped herself when she was about to give away the whole game. This is so unlike you. Emma texted a paragraph about timelines and we already gave notice to our landlord and you said family first. Tyler's text was shorter, you're screwing us. He added a middle finger emoji, which I took as gratitude that he kept it to 1. Dad didn't text at all. He never did. He just showed up. I was washing dishes after dinner when I saw his truck in the driveway. The one I'd helped save with a new transmission. The porch light held snow in its cone like glitter. He got out of the cab, jaw clenched, shoulders tight. He knocked 3 times, hard. A cop knock he'd perfected when we were kids. Grace was at the table with her math notebook. She looked up so fast her pencil rolled onto the floor. It's Grandpa, I said, my voice even. Go to your room for a bit. Okay, she went without arguing. That's how I knew she'd been holding her breath for days. I opened the door and leaned against the frame so he couldn't just walk past me. What are you doing? He said, his hands shaking. He wasn't used to the cold anymore. Or maybe it wasn't the cold. Hi, Dad. Don't hi, Dad me. He jabbed a finger toward my chest. You embarrassed your mother. You embarrassed your sister. She cried. Are you proud of yourself? I declined to co-sign a mortgage. That's all I did. You've always been the steady one. You know that. You step up. That's your role. Not anymore. He scoffed. Over a Christmas misunderstanding? Grow up. You had a family vote to exclude my kid, I said, right there at the table. Hands up. No debate. And you raised yours. He flinched. That's what this is about? You're going to blow up your relationship with your entire family over a holiday? It's not about a holiday. It's about what you told my daughter with your hand. You told her she doesn't count. I'm not funding a family my kid isn't part of. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You're holding us hostage with your money. I laughed, a short, ugly sound. I've been held hostage with my money for 10 years. His jaw worked. You don't talk to your father like that. Then don't talk to your son like I'm an ATM. We stood there for a long minute. His breath came out in white bursts. Behind him, the snow fell harder. On our street, a neighbor's inflatable Santa collapsed in slow motion. He tried one more angle. Your sister is a good person. She deserves that house. That's fine. She can deserve it with her own loan. Something in him curdled. He started to shout words that wouldn't stick to the walls because they didn't have enough truth. Ungrateful. Disloyal. Influenced by that kid, he said, and I felt my hands curl in my pockets, not into fists, but fists around my phone. I thought about recording him. I didn't. I let him finish. When he paused to catch his breath, I said the line I'd practiced on the way to the door. Dad, this is simple. I'm not your backup bank. He blinked. Took a step back. He looked past me into my living room, at the IKEA couch I bought used, at the tree Grace had decorated with paper rings and a crooked star, at the 2 empty dining chairs that matched nothing else because I'd found them on Facebook Marketplace for $5 each. Maybe he saw, for the first time, that I lived here, not in his idea of me. You'll regret this, he said finally. Maybe, I said. But I won't regret protecting Grace. He went down the steps, shaking his head, got into his truck, and backed out too fast, while spinning over a thin layer of ice. I watched his taillights turn the corner. I closed the door. Grace stood in the hallway in her socks. Is he mad? She asked. Yeah, I said. But we're okay, she nodded, and slid her hand into mine. We went back to the table and finished the math problem about 2 trains leaving 2 different cities at different times. I told her the trick is to be clear about your starting point. She smiled, like she wasn't sure if it was a math joke. Maybe it was both. The next days were a mix of quiet and noise. Noise in my phone, quiet in my house. Group texts lit up like fireworks. Mom wrote, "We're so disappointed and we love you" in alternating lines, like she couldn't pick a lane. Emma sent the link to the house listing 3 times and said, Tyler's parents would co-sign, but their credit is trash. Liam wrote, "You always thought you were better than us." Aunt Val sent a prayer hands emoji and family over everything, then asked if I could look at her furnace on Saturday. I didn't answer any of them. That was new for me. At work, I did what I always do. Thermostat out, new board in. Explaining to a client why their smart thermostat made their heat dumb. Carrying a 50-pound box across a yard without cutting a corner. Breathing through it. I didn't go to my parents' house that weekend. Mom texted, "No hard feelings. Sunday dinner at 4. I stared at the screen until the bubbles faded. I cooked spaghetti at home the way Grace likes it, with garlic bread burnt on the edges. On Monday, I did one more thing for myself. I set up a folder in my email labeled Family Financial and I dragged every receipt, every Zelle transfer, every bill I'd paid, into it. It wasn't petty. It was the first time I'd put my own life in order with them in mind. I did not cancel the $150 Friday transfers yet. I know the rules, one boundary at a time if you actually want it to stick. My line was the mortgage. I would hold to that line. The rest would come in its own season. Meanwhile, real life kept moving. Grace had a winter concert at school. She played Good King Wenceslas on a loner trumpet and squinted so hard at the sheet music that her glasses slid down. I clapped until my palms stung. Afterward, in the cafeteria, parents shuffled past with styrofoam cups of hot chocolate. A couple of kids from her art club came over and said, "You sounded like a real trumpet player." She looked at me like, "Do you hear this?" I said, "They're right." I bought her a donut with red sprinkles and we ate it slowly in the car, crumbs on our coats, the radio low. I told her we were starting a new tradition for Christmas Eve. She looked wary. "Just us?" she asked. "Maybe not just us," I said. December 24th came, wet and gray. In my family's house on the other side of town, there was probably a tree with coordinated ornaments and a couch covered in gifts. In my house, our tree leaned a little because I hadn't cut the trunk straight, and our gifts were wrapped in leftover birthday paper. I bought Grace a set of fancy markers and a sketchbook with heavy paper. I put them under the tree with exactly the same care I'd use if they were diamonds. I set the table with our 4 mismatched plates. I put those 2 $5 chairs where guests would sit, if we had any. I pulled a ham out of the oven and set out bowls of mac and cheese and green beans and a salad no one was going to touch. I poured 2 sparkling apple ciders and put 1 glass in front of the empty chair across from Grace. She looked at it and smiled, confused. "Who's that for?" she asked. "You'll see," I said. At 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. Grace blinked like I'd made a rabbit appear. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. It was my cousin Mark and his wife, Tori. They live 20 minutes away, and we only ever see them at family things when Mom controls the guest list. Mark held a paper bag with a baguette and a bottle of something that looked expensive. Tori held a pan with foil on top. "We brought bread and a sweet potato casserole," she said. "We also brought 2 loud children, but they're staying with my sister tonight." Grace stood up so fast her chair squeaked. "Hi," she said. And then, like a miracle, she said, "I'm really glad you're here." "Us, too," Mark said. He stepped in, stamped snow off his boots, and hugged me in a way that said, "I heard things." His voice was low. "For the record," he said, "the vote was messed up." "You heard about that?" I asked. "Everyone heard," Tori said. "Val told my mom. My mom told me. We decided we'd rather be in a house where a kid is wanted." I swallowed. That one sentence untied some knot in my chest. We ate. We talked about nothing dramatic. Grace showed them the snowflake she kept in her pocket, and Tori said, "That's beautiful," and put it on the mantel like it was a museum piece, not a napkin project. Mark asked Grace if she liked music, and when she said trumpet, he said, "That's hardcore." I lasted 2 weeks on trombone. They laughed. We didn't mention my parents or the house or the mortgage or the DocuSign. It was a rule I didn't have to say out loud. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed, face down on the counter. 10 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from Emma, 1 from Aunt Val, a "Where are you?" from Liam. The group thread said, "We're doing the gifts now. FaceTime." I put the phone in a drawer and closed it. Then I opened the drawer and put it on Do Not Disturb, which felt less like running away and more like choosing peace. Grace ate 3 rolls and asked for seconds on ham. She told a story about a classmate who tried to eat a glue stick. We all pretended to be shocked. It was normal. Normal felt like a warm jacket. When they left, they took their casserole dish and left their presents behind. Grace stood in the doorway, waving until their taillights turned the corner. "That was better," she said. "Yeah," I said. "It was." She looked at the 2 extra chairs still at the table. "Are those for them?" "They were for anybody who wanted to be here." She nodded. They wanted to be. I went into the living room and plugged in the tree lights. We sat on the couch under a blanket. She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she did when she was 5 and watched cartoons about trains. The house creaked the way old houses do when the heater cycles. It sounded like someone settling in, not someone leaving. My phone buzzed once on the counter. A single message that came through despite Do Not Disturb because I'd set Mark as a favorite years ago after he helped me move a broken dryer. It said, "Proud of you." The next morning, we opened gifts. Grace held the markers like they were fragile and told me she wouldn't waste them. She drew a small card with a pine tree and wrote in neat letters that leaned like little kids, "Thank you for choosing me." She taped it to the fridge with a piece of glitter tape left over from some craft kit. When I made coffee, I touched the edge of the card with my knuckle. It was proof of something I had felt but never been able to say out loud. A week later, Emma texted a photo of a for rent sign and wrote, "Hope you're happy." I didn't reply. She followed with, "We'll remember this when you need something." I typed, "I won't ask," then deleted it and set the phone down. Silence was cleaner. Dad didn't show up again. Mom sent a framed picture of the cousins from Christmas Eve with the note, "Wish you were here." I put it face down on the bookshelf behind a stack of manuals. Maybe one day I'll flip it over. Not today. On New Year's Day, I went for a walk with Grace in the park by the river. The air bit our cheeks. She tucked her mittened hand into my elbow the way old couples do. We watched geese skate on thin ice and decided it was the dumbest ballet. She told me she'd signed up for Art Club's spring fundraiser, making cards for people in the neighborhood. "I'll make one for Nana," she said. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said. "Even if she puts her drink on it." We laughed. It wasn't bitter. It was a release valve. I realized I'd been waiting for a consequence to swallow us whole. The big family rupture. The exile, the word ungrateful nailed to my door. It did come, in a way, but it wasn't big. It was a quiet drift, like a boat pushed out from a dock on a lake. Not dramatic, just free. In January, I got an envelope from the lender with a form letter saying, "We're sorry to see you've declined to participate in this loan." It had a carbon copy feel, like the last line of a play. I slid it into my family financial folder and closed the drawer. I made one more choice that month that felt small but solid. I went into my bank app and renamed my Friday transfer from Nana's Meds to Friday Gift. I wanted better words for what I give. I left the amount the same. I keep paying it until I decided otherwise, because that was my decision to make, not Mom's. And now that I had said one big no, my smaller yes felt like mine again. In February, Grace brought home a flyer for a middle school talent show. She asked if it was okay if she tried out with Winter from Vivaldi. I said it was perfectly okay to be ambitious. She practiced in the dining room with her trumpet case open like a busker. The sound wasn't pretty. It was brave. The night of the show, Mark and Tori came. They sat in the second row and clapped like they were related. Grace walked on stage in Converse and a black dress I found on sale at Target and blew those first cold notes like she'd opened a door to the season. I thought about all the rooms she'd been kept out of. I thought about the doors I could open. Back at home, I hung her program on the fridge underneath the card she'd made me. I straightened both with the edge of my hand. I am not a hero. I am a guy who fixes things, and who finally realized that the first thing I needed to fix was the leak where all my love and money were draining out into a family that smiled as they watched. I did one thing. I didn't co-sign. I said no. It was enough to change the shape of our house. On the next Christmas Eve, I set the table again for 4 plates, 2 extra chairs. Maybe it looked like we were waiting for people who wouldn't come. Maybe we were. But on the mantel, Tori's place for Grace's paper snowflake stayed empty on purpose so the snowflake could breathe. In the middle of the table, Grace stood a card she had made, our new centerpiece. It had a tree and a trumpet and 2 chairs drawn in simple lines. Underneath, in the steady handwriting she'd been practicing all year, it said, "We belong."